Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week, I spend about 15 minutes covering key legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. We are going to talk about internal investigations. As you know, if you have listened to the podcast for a bit, we do talk about internal investigations occasionally because they're interesting topics and most of our HR employment law friends conduct investigations. So it's an important issue for us to think about. Today, I want to challenge some of the assumptions about the best practices for conducting investigations. And I'll tell you how this sort of came into play. I've been doing a lot of investigations lately. Our whole office has. It's just, there have been a lot of workplace complaints and a lot of folks who need help with investigations. So we've been doing that. And we're finding with a lot of the folks we talk to, they have the clients, the employers, have some pretty defined perspectives about how an investigation should be conducted. And one of the things that we have found is that many times those perspectives are actually based on either incorrect information or information that has become outdated due to other things that are going on in the world. So let me give you an example. Before COVID, most investigators did not do interviews remotely. They didn't do them on Zoom. They didn't do them on Teams. They didn't do them by the telephone. These days, we do a ton of investigation interviews remote because it saves the client money in terms of travel. It saves the witnesses time in case they decide, the client decides that they should come to our office. And we have found that our ability to assess the credibility of the witnesses is not negatively impacted at all by doing the interview over, let's say, Teams or Zoom. Now, telephonic interviews are a little more tough because you don't get to read body language. You don't get to see the folks. In many investigations, honestly, that doesn't matter in our opinion because it's not going to come down to credibility. But in close calls or investigations that are particularly sensitive, we think that you really should do those interviews either remotely with a camera so you can actually see what's going on or in person. There are a lot of those kinds of issues that I want to talk about here this morning. So first of all, don't be afraid to do interviews remote. Don't be afraid to tell your employer or a client, look, I'm perfectly comfortable doing these interviews without being there in person. And you, of course, have to feel comfortable yourself that it's not going to jeopardize the integrity of the investigation or reduce the quality of your investigation. But it's really something that we have found not to be a problem at all. Another thing that we are finding quite frequently is clients, employers who want very lengthy reports of the investigation. We find this more with our public sector clients where they want a summary of what did every witness say, what did every document reveal. They're expecting a very detailed background section in the report. Now, more information is fine, but there's a strategy here that I think some employers are missing, which is if you ever end up giving a copy of that report, perhaps you decide that you want to show that you did a thorough investigation, or maybe your litigation counsel recommends that you provide a copy in a lawsuit. If you give a detailed report where you show what everybody said about every issue, you're essentially giving the other side a roadmap. They know exactly how to prepare their witnesses. They know exactly what they want to be saying. And it makes that report less of a tool for the employer to be able to say, look, this is a contemporaneous report of what the investigator thought happened, whether internal or external. So we are relying on that report. And then later on down the road, when there is litigation, for example, you can use the report as a way to check credibility, right? If someone testifies to something differently in a deposition, for example, you've got that report that you can look at and you can have your investigator testify as to how they got that information and on how they recorded that information in their report. If you give a full report of every little thing that happened during the investigation, that tool goes away for you as an employer. The other thing is when you are using external investigators, the cost of the investigation skyrockets when you want to have a lengthy full report. I reviewed a report for a client the other day that an outside investigator had done. It was 150 pages, and the bill, according to the client, was almost $125,000. And it didn't escape me that that's almost, $1,000 a page for this report. But it was a good report, but it was overdone. It just didn't need all of the detail and all the how the sausage is made. The findings were well done. The investigator did a good job with questions. The evidence was there. And I really, really think that report could have been done in 10 pages because it was very clear what was going on. And much of the information in that report was just regurgitation of documents, things that the client could have reviewed as an attachment. It just wasn't done efficiently. And when you're using whether an internal investigator or an external investigator, you want to be sure that you are really clear about how you expect the product to look and the fact that you want it done as quickly and efficiently as possible. You don't need to be wasting a lot of time and money on these things unless there's something else going on, right? I have done investigations where I have needed to prepare a very lengthy 100-some-odd page report because of the number of allegations and the people involved and the fact that maybe the press was already involved in the situation. So there are times when that may be appropriate, but I think it's really important for you as a client and as an HR investigator or employment law investigator to understand what is going to be best for the situation and what do you really need to be doing. Because most of the time, getting it done quickly is the most important factor. Making sure that you can get in, you can get the investigation done, and you can figure out what needs to happen in terms of a resolution. That's really what most employers are focused on. So if you can deliver a product to them quickly that is well done, but more of a summary fashion, more of an executive summary, for example, you're going to be able to meet the needs of your client most of the time. And it's going to be quicker. You're going to be able to move on to something else. The cost will be lower if you're a third-party investigator. So I always tell clients, look, it's your decision how you want this investigation report to look. Sometimes, of course, they'll wait until they figure out what the findings are, which makes a lot of sense. And they'll decide, okay, well, do I feel like I need more or less information in a particular situation? But this idea that your investigation report should be a book report, it should outline everything that happened and who said what when, it's just outdated. It's not necessary anymore. Remember that investigation report is a tool. It's a tool to help the employer identify if there's something going on at work that needs to be fixed. It's not the be all end all. All right. It's really that crystal ball for the employer to try to understand what the dynamics are. And if you keep that in mind, if you think about that as being the ultimate goal of the investigation and the report, I think it'll help you to cut corners when you can without, of course, jeopardizing the integrity in the investigation or the thoroughness of the investigation or the ability of the investigation and your own testimony to withstand scrutiny, okay? Another sort of best practice that I think needs to be challenged is this idea that we have to interview every witness who anybody identifies. So if the complainant gives you 220 witnesses, you have to interview all 220 of them. If the respondent gives you 25 names, you've got to get them all in line so that you can conduct an interview. It's just not the case. Your job as an investigator is to use your brain to figure out what you really need, okay? What do you really need? Who do you really need to talk to? What documents do you really need to review? So we have a client right now who sent over almost 100,000 documents for us to review as part of an investigation. 99% of them are completely irrelevant. But we didn't know that, right, until we looked at them. The client could have figured that out if they'd done a better search of their emails and tailored the request to their IT department so that it generated far fewer but much more relevant documents. But once we get them from a client, we have to review them. We obviously can't say we reviewed them if we didn't. And if we don't review them, then that's evidence that somebody has made available to us that we haven't looked at. So it's very important to think about what you actually need. And as the investigator, to be able to say, look, that's not what we need. And by the way, we push back when we receive the documents and we're told that there are internal reasons why they need us to review every piece of paper. So I'm not questioning that. That's fine. But before we started billing and going through all of these, we called the client to say, hey, did you intend to send us over 100,000 documents, right? So one of the things that I get concerned about with investigators is that we think there's a recipe. We think there's a way to do it every single time. And the truth is, investigations are going to be different every single time, right? You're going to interview people maybe generally in the same way. You might take the same overall approach to the investigation and to drafting your factual findings. But every investigation is going to have different little ins and outs and crevices and crannies that you need to look in. And the end result is going to depend on your own good judgment as you go through the investigation. So these folks who think, oh, it's easy to do investigations. I used to do litigation. Now I just want to take the easy way out and I'm going to start working on investigations. I really don't understand that perspective because I find investigations to be very challenging, very interesting. Some of you know my favorite heroine, or one of them as a child, was Harriet the Spy. So I love the idea of doing investigations. They're very interesting. They're very puzzly and fun, but they're hard. I don't find them easy in the simplest of matters. So we have to have our head screwed on straight when we're thinking about who do we need to interview, what documents do we need to look at, and be willing to take it step by step. For now, I need these 2 witnesses. I'll let you know if I need more. For now, I need these 5 documents. I'll let you know if I need more. Okay? The last sort of best practice that I want you to think about is this idea of how we schedule investigations. Okay? So let me be a little more clear. So if you are an internal investigator, all right, and you've got a lot of things on your plate, and somebody comes to you with a new complaint that needs to be investigated, what many investigators think is, okay, well, as long as I get it started, if it takes a while to finish because I'm so jammed up with everything else, I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, because at least I started right away. And I'll be honest, I used to feel that way. Like, okay, as long as I get started right away, that's what matters. But here's the problem. If you start an investigation and you don't finish it for 3 months, there's been a lot of chit chat during that time, I guarantee you. It is much more effective to start an investigation, get in and get out as quickly and efficiently as you can. So if you have to tell your boss or your internal client that you can't start for 2 weeks, but once you do, you will wrap it up right away, that's what you should do. Don't think that the better thing is to start it even if it takes you longer to finish it. That is not a best practice. And in fact, I have been involved personally in many litigations where investigators have really been given a tough time by the court about the fact that it took them so long to do an investigation. Now, we've all been in this situation where the witnesses don't make themselves available, the client doesn't give you the documents you need, somebody's on a leave of absence for 6 months. Of course, I get all of that. But if you have the ability to look at your schedule and figure out when you can get things done, don't start the investigation until you can get in and get it done. The idea is not to start it and then let it languish while you're finishing up 4 other things. Okay? So I know we've only talked about a few of these best practices that I think need to go away, that are no longer best practices if they ever were. We are about to start our 3-day investigations workshop that Eric Glassman facilitates. He is amazing. And if you are looking for some guidance on conducting investigations, you want to understand the newest, hottest trends, newest, hottest best practices, how to write a report, which we devote an entire day to, you need to join us. So go to the website, register for that workshop. Space is limited because it is very interactive. We have people who come every year because the mock investigation we use changes every year. Brooke Kozak in our office, she's our investigations practice leader. She puts those together and they are amazing. So I hope you will join us. In the meantime, everyone, go out and have a wonderful day. Happy 2025 again, and I'll see you next time. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others, post about it on social media, and/or rate and review it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.